it's so nice having friends on the show because it doesn't feel like it's a traditional conversation. It feels like people are just getting a glimpse into my life with awesome humans that I get to surround myself with. And Josh happens to be one of those. And so if you guys know anything about me, you know that I like to hang around different types of people who take their life seriously and live a life worth dying for. And I believe Josh is that human to a T. And this is why I want to have him on the show. So thanks for taking time today, bud.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here. Looking forward to it.
I know it's been, man, since the moment we met in Tarapoto, Peru, it's been a minute. It's been a hot minute, and you have done so many things in such a short period of time, and you have accomplished so many things. But like, right, let's just start with like the conversation we were just having. So we were talking about, like, it's been rough. And I'm like, man, what's going on? Like, you good? And you're like, no, I just finished 100-mile ultra marathon. Can we just start there?
Yeah, for sure. Um,
Dude.
yeah, so Saturday, I ran 100 miles in 22 hours and 16 minutes.
Okay, I need to understand. Like, I already knew that you were a bad dude, and I already knew your background. And so, if you guys don't know much about Josh, the whole bomb exploding, SF bad dude turned into breathwork, amazing, humble human who has grown, exponentially year over year with his mindset in every aspect of his life. What brought you to an ultra marathon?
Man, that is a question that I have been asked a lot recently, and I'm still like exploring myself personally.
Okay.
I think a few different things. I mean, I think one is like I have demons inside of me that like most of us, and part of the way that I deal with those is through like self-suffering. And I'm fortunate that most of the time the suffering I like to choose to put on myself is through some sort of positive means, at least with like athletic events and just hard challenges like that. So I think that's definitely plays a factor. And then I think another thing is just something I saw actually on Saturday that was so cool, which was like I had my fiance and like four of our close friends, two couples that were crewing me the whole time, like there for me, making sure I'm eating, drinking water, just anything I need. And after the race, just kind of in my mind, I was like so grateful that they were going to spend that time with me, just because I knew it was going to suck and it was going to take, somewhere around 24 hours. And like, they took Friday off of work and dedicated their whole weekend basically to take care of me. And then hearing them talk about it after the race and like how much fun they had, I was like, that was shocking to me because I thought they were just going to be completely miserable. But like part of it is like I know there's a lot of people out there that aren't willing to like go to those dark places and like to do the suffering that I'm willing to do. And I totally get it. But seeing like how much positive impact me choosing to do something like that has on people around me is like just incredible for me. So I get a lot out of that, I think, as well too.
Well, I think that's the beautiful thing about ultra marathon running. And I've been speaking to a lot of different ultra marathon runners recently. I don't know, I didn't even know you were doing this. So this is just making me so happy. It makes me realize that you were such a perfect guest today because this is literally the conversation I've been having the past 2 weeks. And ultra marathon running, for some people who don't understand the extent and what that looks like, people train for marathons, that's one thing. You train for a half marathon, that's another thing. But to train past the marathon point, that mindset has to shift so drastically. Forget the physicality of it, put the mindset. And what most people don't realize, because I don't know that they break themselves to that point, is it can get dark fast. And when I say dark, I'm not talking about I'm having a bad day, Josh. Like there is things in there when you give space and they come forward, you either break because you don't know how to handle it, or you slowly learn how to have those conversations with that darkness. And when you lean into those moments, that's where you find that growth that nobody is able to achieve unless they've done and put themselves through that extent of pain. So ultra marathon running, You were a runner before. I knew you right after you did your 50 mile. From that point on, you've gone through a massive transition, and it's not my place to talk about your journeys, but we met in Peru. And if people don't know or follow that, that's where ayahuasca typically happens with a traditional setting. And Josh and I both, being involved with Heroic Hearts Project, both were given awesome opportunities. You were facilitating and leading that group into Peru. And I got to say, you were a pleasant surprise because I had never sat with a traditional group like that before. And you made everyone feel so at peace and so at ease and so welcome just by being who you were. So, before we dive more into what it takes to actually become this type of athlete, talk to me a little bit about your past and what brought you to Heroic Hearts Project and how we end up colliding in this world.
Yeah, sure. Lots of things probably. You know, the summary of it, I spent 10 years in the Navy, right, as a EOD tech. Um, you know, Fortunately now I look back on it and like I'm grateful. I never saw direct combat experience. So a lot of the things that I looked to deal with, with psychedelics and plant medicines were stemmed from my childhood, and kind of my upbringing, which was, good at times and really rough at times, probably like most people. But I think after I transitioned out of the military, one, like I had a lot of I dealt with it was hard for me because like I came from like this elite community, right? Where it's like, you go through that transition process and it was still so fresh for me. And like that's what I had to rely on to open up doors for me in my new career opportunities. That's, I joined the military right out of high school. So that's all I did as a profession, as an adult, until now. And so I struggled for a long time with the fact that like I never got to like do the job that I really signed up and wanted to do, and lost frankly, like a lot of close friends and people that I really cared about that did have their name called. And so that was a challenge for me for a long time, was like, why, I was on all the teams that were supposed to be there and like do stuff. And it just like, last minute something would always happen and our mission would change, and I got to do a lot of great things and had a lot of great experiences, but it was like, I kind of tell people it's like you're a professional athlete basically, and it was like being a professional athlete and all I ever got to do was practice and never play in the game. So I think part of the reason why I was drawn to like ultra marathons and just doing hard stuff after the military was like there was still something inside that I had to prove to myself that like you are capable. Like, how am I going to react in these situations, right? Like when things are on the line, or I'm 75 miles deep into a race, like are you going to be able to make it through when things get really tough and stuff? So there was a lot of like unanswered questions for me that I feel like I had to prove myself something. I had something still that I had to prove to myself.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into that unfulfilled purpose, because I see a lot of people going through that point right now, the post, 2021, whether you were in and you never deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan, but I'm seeing this sense of loss with individuals who didn't get to go run and gun or bang doors or do whatever it is they were told they were going to go do. There is this almost moral injury. I don't know if that's the right terminology for it, but do you know what I'm talking about? I'm seeing it with people who are like, I just trained and trained and trained and trained and then never got to the finish line with it in the way they thought they would. It's not that they didn't, or I believe that, it's what they are expressing to me they feel. And that's such a hard place to be. And I honestly don't know how to coach people through that, because it is something that is completely new and unexpected, and I'm just starting to hear come up. So how did you move through that, other than going into ultra marathoning? Were there other techniques or tools or thought process besides, your breath, that helped you move through this? And brought to you by We Go Home. If you guys haven't heard of We Go Home, you got to go check them out. It's WeGoHomeSubs.com. This company is fantastic. They're based in the United States, and their whole mission is to provide a platform highlighting the raw and real perseverance of the training of men and women in blue, the current and prior and military, as well as EMS and first responders. Ultimately, they want them to be able to exceed the standards so they can always return home. They also have a ton of different options with We Go Home, including supplements, clothing lines, and training programs. You guys got to check them out. They're at We Go Home Supps. That's We Go Home, SUPPS.com, and see what they're all about.
I mean, I think a lot of it was, like I worked through a lot of it through psychedelic experiences, and I think meditation, and I think just growing and becoming more mature as a human too. And it was just like, at the end of the day, it was like, that time has come and gone, and it's in the past, and there's nothing I can do to change it. And it was like, I just look at where I am now and I'm like, hey, that was just part of my path. It wasn't my calling to go do that. Maybe I had already had too much trauma in my life, and like, any more trauma was going to send me over the edge. And,
Don't compound it.
yeah. And like, that was just God's plan for me, so it's like, I think I just came to a point where it's like, I just accepted the fact that like, hey, that's where my journey has led me. And it doesn't mean I'm, a lesser of a human being or anything like that. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. And I know, a lot of good guys that are still that still haven't got, that calling to go do that. And so it's like, at the end of the day, it's like everyone's on their own path, and you just got to take what's in front of you and keep moving forward.
Oh, you say it so eloquently and with such conviction because you've been down the path. And that's why I like to talk to people like you, because you are not somebody who spews this internet bullshit to get clicks and likes. You're just somebody who genuinely lives it and exists, and you put it out there for people to learn from. And you can actually learn from someone like you. I got to understand, though, how we go. First marathon, first 50 miles. Was it always your intent to try to do the 100-miler? Was that like a goal you had placed?
Yeah. So, I mean, to be completely honest, like I'm wouldn't be, I mean, now I guess I have to consider myself a runner, but like
You think?
I hated
What?
running. Like I've never enjoyed running. I was not a runner growing up. I wasn't even a
Okay.
runner in the military, like I ran because I had to and someone told me to, but I was never a good runner in the military. Like I was middle of the pack, back of the pack type of guy. It wasn't really until I got out of the military that I kind of started to find a love for running. And I think it all happened kind of at the same time when I was going through that transition out of the military. I was going through my second divorce at the time, and it was just like I was having to reinvent myself and like really figure out, like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know myself. I didn't know my purpose. I didn't know what I cared about, what my values were. And so a lot of that had to do with like finding, plant medicines too. It had a huge impact on that. But running was something that kind of I started to explore as a way just to spend time alone with my thoughts, as another form of meditation. And so, yeah, like, over the years, as I got more into running, and I decided to do my first ultra was a 50K, which is like 32 miles or something like that, I think. And then I did that last year. And then after that, I was kind of like, okay, it went horribly wrong, right? Like I had no idea what I was doing. My training was garbage for it. And I blew up basically the first lap of the race and went out way too fast and ended up walking, most of the second lap of the race for 10 or 15 miles. So I was really disappointed in myself after that race because I knew I was capable of doing better. And so I decided, like, okay, I'm going to do a 50-mile race after that and really like dedicate the next 16 weeks to training. And that's my life. And I probably went a little too overboard where it impacted other areas of my life because I was so focused on like, I am going to crush this 50-mile race. It paid off because I did do really, really well, and it was awesome. My first 50-mile, I think I got 6th overall. So it was,
Oh, wow.
I was really happy with my performance. And, but again, other aspects of my life suffered for that. So after that race, I was like, okay, that was, yeah, it was hard, but it was like, there was still plenty more in the tank and a lot more to explore. So naturally, I was just like 100-mile distance is what I want to do next. And I took a long time off. So I did that 50 mile in July of last year, and then just did the 100 mile this past weekend. So, about 18 months in between those races, and um, had plenty of time to train for the 100 mile race and stuff. And yeah, that was the goal. It was kind of like, I want to do 100, and that's kind of, the gold standard for ultra distances, right now. And so I put my sights on that, and kind of, spent the next year training for it.
So when you say that sometimes life takes a backseat, or the other aspects of your life, they can potentially not just be harmed, but kind of put off to the side. How does somebody successfully do these types of runs and these types of distances while holding things together and building your life around being an athlete? Because that's really what you're doing at this point, it sounds like, is you were putting things to the side. But how do you do that successfully while still holding it all together and training properly?
Yeah. For me, it's just understanding that, like, hey, I'm not a professional athlete. I don't get paid to do this. I would love to have that opportunity maybe one day, but right now that's not where I am. um so yeah, so for me, it was like taking a step back and being like, okay, yes, this is a big goal and something that like means a lot to you, but there's other things in my life that mean more to me than, being able to run 100 miles, particularly, my fiance and my family and my friends and my mental health and stuff. So I just had to be okay with making sacrifices sometime in my training when other things came up that were more important for, what I truly valued, and what I thought was more important at the time. Whereas, training for that 50 mile, that was it. Like, that was the only thing that I cared about. So it was like, I'm not going to sacrifice a training day to go out to dinner. And like, I'm not going to go to this family event and skip a workout. It's workouts come first. And that's like the number one priority. Whereas this time it was like, you're going to do everything you can to get the best training you can, but you're not going to sacrifice these other things in your life just to go out for a run.
Hmm. I've heard people say, and I always hear these type of people saying it about ultra runners and stuff. And I mean, it's pretty obvious as to why they're saying it. But individuals who say, well, they must have something to run from. They must have done something so severe in their life or so traumatic that they have to just run because they can't live with themselves. Now, let me preface this with, these people are often quite stagnant individuals, morbidly obese, and cannot do these things themselves. And it seems like these voices come from individuals, who will never achieve. And it's always those people that are going to have something to say about the people that can. So how do you see running as a tool?
I'm brought to you by Mindful Meds. You guys have been seeing me take Mindful Meds for a little while now. Mindful Meds is a premium supplement company dedicated to supplying humans with the tools to improve their mental health, clarity, and performance, all while supporting their growth along the way. Whether it's the Immunity Blend, Lion's Mane, Inspire, or Voyage, all of their products are clean, tested, consistent, and they've become a huge help in my life. I found Mindful Meds over a year ago now, and I've never looked back. Go check out their website, mindfulmeds.io, and use the code BRASS at checkout.
Yeah, it's been such a huge like tool that I've been able to add to my tool belt of all these other modalities that we have, access to. For me, I love it so much because it's the only area really in my life other than, meditation, which I don't spend hours practicing, where it's like I'm completely by myself for 4 to 5 hours, sometimes on these long runs. And that solitude, like you said earlier, is just something that most people never get, throughout their days or their lives, even, where, it's just you, yourself, and your mind. And something that I was so drawn to ultra running is because it's an individual sport, and you don't have people in the stands cheering you on, or team members to rely on. Now, to caveat that, you obviously have your crew there who is kind of taking care of you, but you see them every few hours maybe, or something like that throughout the race. So it's like it's really, you're relying on your mind and your body to kind of get you through those tough times. And I love that aspect of it, because like at any point you can choose to quit, stop, walk, and there's no one that you can blame for that, because it's just you that's there, you know? So it's like you're the one making those decisions in the day, in the step-by-step moments of a race, or even in training, you know? It's like, so it's a very lonely sport, for the most part. And that's what drove me to it. And I think why I like it so much is because I get to spend a lot of time with myself and my thoughts and my mind. And it's peaceful for me. And it's another form of meditation that I've found.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because you are a fairly social person and you are really good in social settings and you seem to thrive around other individuals. But to hear you say that you love the solitude, you love the peace, that's something that we've been exploring a little bit more with the podcast and with individuals, is about that solitude and that quiet discomfort and that peace. And the last guy I spoke with, who was also an ultramarathon runner, we were speaking about solitude in that way. So talk to me what solitude means to you in the truest sense, because most people don't quite understand what we're saying when we're speaking about long, quiet moments and what that can invoke and bring up in the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Like for me, for instance, I mean, there's, not a lot of chances or opportunities that I get on a day-to-day basis where I'm completely away from not only people, but, inputs, whether it's from social media, my phone, work emails, TV, Netflix, parents, whatever the case may be. But I typically don't listen to music or anything when I go for
Oh,
runs too. So I really
so
am
brave.
yeah. um, so it truly is like, solitude, right? Where it's like, I have my breath, I have the voice of my shoes hitting off the pavement and my stride, and then I have whatever crazy shit is going on in my mind at that moment. And that's it, so it's like, it's an awesome opportunity to kind of just, get away from all the bullshit and all the noise, right? There's so much noise around us at all times nowadays. And that's what solitude is. It's like, it's being by yourself with nothing else that can impact what's going on in your mind. For me, it's like, there is no input or stimulus around there other than what I'm visually seeing around me. So it's a great opportunity to kind of have a lot of clarity of thoughts. And I love it because I have, like, there will be times where I'll go on runs and they'll be really impactful and amazing. I'll have a lot of good ideas and kind of have a lot of creativity happen in runs. Or there'll be times where it's like really dark and I'm just like working through issues that I'm, currently going through in life. And it's not very fun. It's kind of like, I'm working through bad thoughts and, unpleasant feelings or emotions or stuff like that. And then there's other times where it's like neither of those, and I'm just fully in the present, and my mind isn't racing. I'm just literally with my breath and with my stride. And those are amazing moments too. And so it's like, that's the other really cool thing for me about running, is you never know what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis. It's like, you just go out and, you see what the life brings you that day.
Do you do a journaling practice after runs like this to kind of explore those thoughts and maybe dive deeper or track the feelings and emotions that kind of come with it?
I don't. It's something that I go back and forth with a lot, where I'll kind of get into like a journaling practice and I'll stop and start. I haven't been very consistent with it over the past year or so, but it's something I always tell myself, like, oh man, I got to write this down. I'm like, I'm going to forget this. And it's just, one of those things where I go through these bursts of whether I'm doing it or not, so.
Yeah, fair enough. I always find it interesting when you do hard things, what thoughts come out in places that you never would have expected. I always like to look at the hard thought as to why that's coming up, where it's coming from, how it's impacting my life, how it's impacting what I'm doing, future decision making. But like I said, not a lot of people get these moments of solitude to have that. And something that I knew about you before, but I want to kind of break down is how did you become so involved with breath work? Because it seemed like you understood breath work to an extent in which most people I've ever met don't. And you've even done some really cool kind of research with it as well. And I would love to talk about how breath work became a part of your life and how you still utilize it now.
Yeah. Yeah, that originally stemmed kind of when I was going through the transition out of the military. I was trying to figure out like what I was going to do when I got out, and I kind of caught the entrepreneur bug. And so I actually started like a breathwork company when I was like on my way out of the military, and started developing some programs that like, you know, other military personnel or athletes could get involved and follow, just to help enhance their performance or recovery. And you know, so when I first kind of got into that, I just started doing a lot of self-research and reading a lot of like studies and, you know, things from academia and stuff. And I was like pretty shocked with the volume and the amount of research that had been done over the past decade or so. And at the time, this was back in, you know, 2019. It's much different now. I'd say there's a lot more like mainstream awareness over breath work, and, you know, Huberman and like Whoop and other people have played a huge factor in getting that out to the mainstream. But back in 2019, that wasn't the case. It was very much like still underground, and there was these small buckets of communities, particularly more in like the, you know, high performance, like professional athlete realm, that were using this stuff originally. And so, you know, I just started reading as many books and publications and clinical studies as I could. And I was like, oh my God, like all of this like knowledge is here, and like no one's talking about it, you know? So like I just kept talking about it and wanted to get that out there, and ended up being really lucky and getting connected with some pretty key like thought leaders within the medical community that I created relationships with, and, you know, was fortunate enough to be pretty involved in like helping some people recover, you know, from like autoimmune diseases and some respiratory issues when COVID was really hot. So got pretty involved in like the healthcare side of things with like what we now call autonomic reconditioning, which is just kind of like reconditioning of the autonomic nervous system through like breath modulation. And so that original company actually was just recently acquired by a Canadian company, actually. And so I've kind of like taken a step back of like from the day-to-day operations of running that company, and a new CEO has taken it. But she's doing some really cool things. There's like a mobile application that's in the market now.
Oh,
and stuff for
wow.
it. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see like the next transition and journey of what that is now become from what I originally started working with it. But yeah, it's a huge part of just like my personal practice, and, you know, I see a lot of benefits of it throughout my, you know, day typically too. So
Well, breathwork is, it's, I don't know, it's another one of those things that has come out where people are like, oh, this is like the new way to fix everything. It's like, because Huberman talked about it, it must be magic. It's like, well, okay, humans have been breathing. We take, what is it, 22,000 breaths a day. Most of us breathe. We just don't know how to breathe effectively. I want to talk to you a little bit more in depth about your thoughts around breath work, and possibly teaching it to younger generations and the benefit that that could have moving forward, considering, trying not to be nihilistic, the younger generations have got a shitstorm that's going to follow them for quite some time that we've left them in. And my biggest concern having a tiny human is kind of watching the development of children pre-COVID, like pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, and then the repercussions, because don't get it twisted, there are serious repercussions with children and young adolescents right now that we are seeing. So how could something like breath work be implemented in a way that is taught regularly enough that hopefully we could, you know, regulate nervous systems before they become dysregulated, or kind of flip them back to a normal regulated state?
yeah. Yeah, I think with children specifically, you know, I don't have children, so I'm kind of speaking with just what I see typically around me. So don't get mad at me if you're a parent and you're like, oh, it's easy to say that, you don't have kids. I get it, so
No, but I have
um,
one, so I'll tell you that if I believe that. How's
yeah.
that?
But I just like, I think, and I know I could have probably benefited from this so much growing up too, right? It's like, as a young child, like you're learning so much. And especially now, there's way more stimulation in the world than when you and I grew up as kids without cell phones and social media and stuff. So as hard as that is, just growing up as a human in general, now you have all this
Yeah.
other crazy shit around you, right? So I can't even
We were
imagine.
plenty fucked up without social media.
Exactly, right. But like one of the most important things I think that you probably get from your parents, or at least the environment you're in, is like, how do I control my emotions and my feelings and reactions to the stimulus and the environment around me, right? And typically nowadays I see like that's, giving a kid a cell phone or an iPad or something, like, hey, they're having some sort of emotional reaction. I don't want to deal with that, or like kind of maybe teach them how to internalize that. So it's distract them, right? That's what we're doing. We're really distracting them from feeling and dealing with whatever that emotion is coming up, or thought, typically. And so I feel like with breath work, it's such a good modality where instead of trying to distract them from the thought or feeling, you can kind of teach them to, let that take over, right? Like feel it. It's okay to feel things. It's okay to think things. That's part of being a human. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not positive and it is very negative, but that's life, right? And if we continue to try to distract young kids from dealing with that, it just compounds as you get older. And you see kind of what we see in maybe like younger adults now, where they don't really know how to deal with life because their entire childhood they haven't dealt with life. They've been distracted from it, and then one day you leave mommy and daddy's nest and you have to go out and experience the world on your own. And if you don't have these very basic tools to be able to do that, we're just setting people up for disaster, and we're not helping them build any sort of resilience to what we all know you are going to encounter in life, no matter what.
It's interesting that you say the word resilience, because I don't know that people think of breath work or mindfulness, meditation, those types of tactics. I don't believe they see them as a resiliency tool. I think that they see them as more of a coping mechanism or an escapism. I've heard that one too, which I find fascinating, because escapism to me has no place around the word meditation and breath work. I believe it is the complete opposite. It's more internalizing. So how would you go about putting a practice into place for children? If you say had kids age, 5 to 10, and you're like, listen, this is something I think that we can teach. This is how we could go about teaching it in a way that they might be receptive to. Putting you completely on the spot right now. My
No, that's
apologies.
good. I I don't have a lot of experience, particularly like coaching young children. So I'm sure there's like just some nuances there that you would have to,
Of course,
with how you interact with them, right? But I think from like a breath work fundamental standpoint, it's pretty basic, and it would be the same for children as I would approach it with adults, and what I've done with my program that I've built, so far. And it's like, it really comes down to three main components for me. It's it's the mechanics of breathing, right? So you have kind of two options. You either breathe through your nose or your mouth. There are certain times where both of those things can be beneficial or, detrimental, depending on what the task and activity that you're trying to accomplish is. The second piece is, kind of the second piece of the mechanics is diaphragmatic breathing, right? So am I breathing with my lower chest or kind of with my upper chest? That has a huge impact on a lot of nerdy stuff with like how much volume of air you're breathing, how much oxygen your body's able to actually absorb. And then the third piece is just respiration rate, right? So how many breath cycles, how many inhales and exhales are you going through on a per minute basis? The two main differences there is you kind of have like slow, relaxed breathing, right? Kind of intentional to calm down the nervous system. And then you have like Wim Hof breathing, right? Which is like intentional hyperventilation, which is really like activating the system, preparing the body for movement. Great, like warm up exercise before you're going to work out or run, just to kind of prime the lungs and the nervous system. So it's teaching them the fundamentals of like, here's the proper way to breathe in certain circumstances, right? Like,
Mm.
if I'm trying to teach a child how to calm down from a temper tantrum, that's
Mm.
going to look very different than if I'm teaching them like, hey, let's warm up before we go do this run, right?
Right.
And so that would be kind of like the primary like fundamentals, is just sitting down there and explaining those differences. And then where I think they could see a lot of really benefit is kind of in that resilience piece that I talked about,
Mhm.
right? Which is, uh, here's what it feels like when your nervous system is reactive and alive and loud. And here's what it feels like when it's
Loud.
right.
Oh, I like that. Sorry, that hit when you said that. Is reactive and loud. Oh, that's such an incredible way to describe a nervous system when it's overactive. That's fantastic, Josh. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Sorry, please continue.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's because right, I think that goes down to the basics of what we want to teach them is, hey,
Yes.
this is what you're feeling in these circumstances, because they don't know why they're reactive or,
Right.
upset. It's they don't know because this is all new to them, but it's like
Mm.
I want to mimic that feeling and that situation in a comfortable, contained environment where they feel safe, right? And
Mm.
breath work is a great, easy way to do that, right? Where I can intentionally have them go through some
Yep.
hyperventilation techniques to increase that arousal state of the nervous system, increase their heart rate. They're going to start sweating, maybe their mind gets a
Mhm.
little noisy and stuff. It's like, okay, that's the feeling. Now they could start to associate, hey, I know that's where I am when I'm in these reactive states, when I'm having a temper tantrum, when I'm mad at mommy because she won't let me have a dessert or whatever
Mm.
the case may be. And then you intentionally let them feel that state, let them spend a few minutes in that state, and then you teach them to bring it back down, right? So you
Mm.
slow down the breath, you start nasal breathing, you start lowering the respiration rate, and then they can feel their nervous system start to slow down and relax. And then you can kind of, I do this with a lot of like military operators. It's really beneficial for their nervous system, for people dealing with PTSD or that are like hypersensitive, to their environment, is you just go up and down the ladder, right, of the nervous system. So we'll hyperventilate for a couple minutes, and then we'll do some slow breathing for a couple minutes, bring it back down, and then as soon as they start to feel relaxed, we'll bring it back up, and we'll just kind of go up and down the ladder like that. That way your body starts to feel comfortable in those different ranges of where the nervous system is, and you start to understand, okay, this is what my internal state is going to feel like when I'm in these different states.
There's so much there, man. There's so much power in teaching individuals what they're feeling, especially children. So twofold, I think you need to come up with a children program, just tossing it out there. I think you'd be incredible at it. But there was another individual I spoke to from Australia that does a similar type of thing, and he brought up biomimicking with children. And biomimicking is exactly what you're speaking about, but doing that in a safe place when your child is having a hard time. And I've done that with our son. I've done biomimic and biofeedback while we've had full out of control meltdowns. And the whole term that keeps coming to mind when he says those things is, I need help, I need help, I need help, I need help, I need help. He could recognize that he didn't understand what was going on with his body, but he also recognized that he couldn't stop it, didn't like how it felt. And then he would sit in my lap and we would breathe together. And then naturally, without him having to think too hard, his body would biomimic
Mm-hmm.
and then it would bring it down into a calmer state. But the hangover that comes from children having these manic episodes, which the reason I wanted to bring this up with you is because we have a high density amount of children right now that are being labeled by whether it's government, doctors, school systems, parents with ADD, ADHD type behavior, bipolar, all of these different psychological disorders that really, frankly, stem from poor nutrition, inability to methylate, a lot of different pathways in our brains. When we feed it things, sometimes it just doesn't agree. So, seeing these types of techniques used, it almost feels too easy. Does that sound crazy?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people feel like it's still very gimmicky for people, right? It's like very Eastern, methodology. Oh, I'm just going to change the way I breathe and everything's going to be okay. And it's like, yeah, I get it. It sounds fucking crazy, right? I know when like, someone I worked with in the military is the person who kind of originally brought breath work to me because he was doing
Mm.
it a lot. And at first I was like, bro, like, what are you talking about? Like, dude, like, I'm pretty sure I know how to breathe, like, and
Been doing it. I'm alive.
yeah, he was a very good athlete and someone who I
Mm.
respected and trusted. So I was like, okay, well, like if you're doing it, like I'm willing to give it a shot. And saw like a huge difference like right away, just with like recovering after workouts and just being able to like, through like if you're doing like high intensity intervals, like how fast you can bring your heart rate down and like recover in between sets. And I was like, okay, there's definitely like something here that like caught my attention. And that's what kind of drove me down the path to really start to like look into it and do some research. But yeah, I mean, there's still plenty of people that I talk to and they're like, yeah, okay, dude, like I don't really get it, and that's fine. It's not for everyone, I understand. But it is like, as far as a tool that can have such a major impact on you, that's so easily accessible that you don't need to spend any money. You don't need an app. Like there's a lot of cool stuff out there that is helpful if you're interested in doing that. But like, go watch a 5-minute YouTube video and you can kind of get the basics to start, doing what you need to do. So it's like,
Right.
it's so accessible for people, which is why I think it's such a great tool.
It's interesting too, because it's so accessible for people, but yet somehow it seems to be like so much work for people. The idea that they have to learn a new behavior, a new tool, a new task, not just take the pill, you
Yeah.
know, it's amazing but here's the kicker. If you could put the ability to have the same effects as breathwork into a pill, that thing would be skyrocketing. Everyone would take it immediately as long as it would work. It's a really perplexing situation, I feel, with individuals who want change but aren't willing to have change unless it's super simple. And breathwork feels simple, but for some it still seems quite complicated or overwhelming
Yeah.
for some reason. I don't know,
Yeah.
like you said, that they could believe that breathwork could be such a life-changing additive. I mean, look at Wim Hof. Didn't the guy climb like one of like the major mountains in shorts and like a
I think
something?
he did like a marathon on Everest, like barefoot in shorts. Yeah. So the dude,
Tell
there's
me.
gotta be something there for sure.
Oh my God. I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure I watched a clip of that the other day and I'm like, what is he doing? But it makes sense. He's insane in a really beautiful way. So I mean, hey, whatever it takes to get it to the masses, but I feel like that is one of the most underutilized tools, especially with young adolescents and children, because if we can get them young enough, just like Soji and all these other crazy ass programs do, if we're going to manipulate them, the least we can be doing is manipulating them into something that'll be beneficial for their lives instead of causing stress and anxiety and more trauma down the road. But hey, who am I to say anything?
100%.
Uh, so talk to me a little bit about how psychedelics came into your life. Obviously, with childhood trauma, and you were looking for solutions outside of the military, post-military, but psychedelics for most people, they seem like a drastic step, a last kick at the can, a real, I'm reaching for something substantial here. So please talk to me about how that came into your life.
Yeah. I was, kind of growing up and just like who I am as a person, I've always been like very open-minded and curious. And especially with like I think things that like changed my mind or like allowed me to see things from a new perspective, whether that's like not very healthy things like alcohol and marijuana and stuff. Like I started smoking cannabis like in high school, and frankly, like I can talk about this because I'm not active duty anymore. Like smoked a lot when I was in the military, and like the first time I actually did psychedelics, I was on active duty still.
That
And
tracks.
yeah. uh, and that was kind of like my first, experience with it. And this was like in 2016, I believe. So it was kind of like, I feel like psychedelics were like really starting to become more mainstream and like a lot of people were talking about them. And actually Michael Pollan's book had just come out,
Mm.
How to Change Your Mind. And I read that book, and that book is what I was like, okay, I want to like, I have to try this. Like I was super curious,
Oh,
you
no.
know? And so I started really small, like doing like, you know, very small doses of psilocybin mushrooms, and had really good experiences with that. And after a couple times of like doing some like 1 to like 2.5, 3 gram experiences with psilocybin, not in like a traditional like ceremonial way, but just like with me and some close friends, you know, in a safe environment. Luckily reading that book, I knew how important like set and setting were, you know, so
Right.
we were trying to do things as best as we could, you know. um and then, you know, I was like, okay, like I think I want more after that. Those times I was like, I still, I was just being drawn to more,
Mm.
you know. And so that was kind of like what led me to like do my first heroic dose or whatever. And I truly, like to this day, like that day changed my life like forever, 100%. Like you know, at that time I had already kind of made up my mind that I was going to leave the military, but you know, that's what led me down like the healing path and kind of like growth path that I'm still on today. I can 100% trace it back to like that decision to like do that big, you know, dose of mushrooms. And you know, since that day I've kind of, you know, they've been a part of my life. I've actually haven't touched anything since we got back from Peru. I've had a
Oh, wow.
yeah, just a really, you know, you know, like my
Yeah.
integration in the beginning was very challenging. I'm still working through a lot of that stuff, but I just haven't felt the need to like, I'm still working through stuff, so I don't need to go deeper. Like there's plenty of shit I have to still like, you know, figure out and then work through in my life. So but they will, I know they will always be a part of my healing journey, whether I, you know, do more of them in the future or feel like I've, you know, kind of gotten what I needed to out of them, and that's it. So
That's amazing. I mean, I love hearing you talk about the back end of that so with such respect, because I think people think when they move through the integration period, they think it's a couple weeks and it's done. Because, you know, with HHP, we do a certain amount of sessions after and like, okay, well, I'm done my integration. It's like, well, one of the things we try to discuss with people is this could happen. You could start getting downloads or conversations a year later, years later, moments later. It could just start coming into your life the way it's supposed to. And integration isn't necessarily a couple week thing. And to be frank with you, most people take a lot longer. But it's interesting to hear kind of where you've come from in the last retreat to where you're at now and how you've worked through all of those things. What have been and we don't have to get into specifics of it, but what have been the best ways you've found and tools you found to help integrate through the process of, because I know some of the stuff has been quite heavy. So like what have you found that's really helped you ground and solidify in these changes?
yeah, I was really lucky. I found a really good therapist that I started working with, and we do. He's very knowledgeable about psychedelics, and so that has been super helpful. But also, it's a perfect like modality of therapy for me. He
Mm.
practices something called IFS. It's
Okay.
interfamily
Yep.
systems. Pretty popular, I think, especially in the psychedelic community. It's become
Hmm.
really popular because it's very like meditation based, where it's not like traditional talk therapy. It's you kind of like, you know, meditating and letting these voices and different parts of you arise and kind of like working through where those parts originated from. The whole system is kind of like you have these exiles, which is like, you know, trauma induced parts of you, and then you have like managers and firefighters who were like other parts of you that were basically brought to life to protect those exiles from going through harm, you know, from feeling basically what happened to you. And so meeting John, my therapist, has kind of been a game changer for me. Whereas like when all these things that you and I have talked about, and like, you know, I was very lost and just was so confused, starting to work with him, I started to uncover like why a lot of those things were happening to me, and like
Mm.
what the underlining thing was that kind of like set that in motion. And so I just like learned so much about myself that had been buried for so long, you know, with my childhood and things that had happened to me that I had no idea about, you know, and through working with him and the therapy, I was able to kind of like uncover a lot of this stuff that started making things like click. And I was like, oh man, this makes so much sense now, you know, it's like, so I see him, you know, every other week, and I've been seeing him for, you know, the past year. And that along with, you know, the running and the meditation and, you know, my fiance Alex has played such a huge support role and system in that. So I've just been lucky that I've had like such a great community around me that has like really brought me in and helped me, because it's something I couldn't do myself, as you know, like you were the first person I actually reached out to, as you know, when all this was going on. So
I'm sorry I wasn't able to
uh,
provide the insight you needed right off the bat, because I felt helpless in trying to help direct you in that one, because I'm like, this is going to take a lot of exploring. And I'm glad that you were able to find the person that has been able to help you really hone in on what it is, because there's nothing worse than seeing someone you know and care for struggle and not have the answer for them.
Yeah. 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 So it's been, you know, a really a huge like healing and growth
Mhm.
year for me. And I know there's a lot of work still to be done, but you know, from where we were a year ago in our
Mhm.
conversations to where I am now is just light years of growth. So I'm super fortunate and blessed to be able to kind of work through all that.
And I'm so glad that you have, because like I said, I've seen it. I mean, I remember the moment I saw you put the ring on her finger. I was like, oh, we've moved through something. Yeah. Like, that's such a powerful feeling when you see people around you crack through something. Like, you can't help but feel that love and that community. And I think that's what's so wonderful about the psychedelic space for the most part. If you are connected with people in it and you see them grow through something and you see them develop through something, it's like it's a win for everyone around you. It's a win for the whole space. It's a win for the individual, and it's a win for the family. It is so fucking beautiful when you see it happen. It's hard to put words. It's a feeling that you can't really describe. And I know when you said community and family, it's so important to have a supportive family network when you go to experiment with these psychedelics, because it can change your world and shift it. So bring me back to what that's like, talking to people around you, like, hey, I'm going to go dive deeper into this, and what comes from it comes from it. Like, how does somebody even broach those conversations with family and those around them?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I feel pretty lucky because, you know, the people around me like were really supportive in my journeys and stuff. That has changed, I will say, since coming back from Peru, just because of
Mm.
how intense that integration process has been, especially for Alex, my fiance, and I totally understand like her point of
Mhm.
view. It's like, hey, like we need, you know, if you do decide that this is something you want to do again, like it's not just like you get to decide and you get to go. It's like we need to have like a very serious
Mhm.
conversation and make sure we're aligned. And I totally respect that decision and think that's the best thing for both of us. Um, but that's part of this, you know, I think what she sees is like she sees the other side of it too, right? She's been through two retreats with me, my first
Mhm.
one to Mexico and then the one to Peru. So she's kind of seen like the first one in Mexico when I got back from that was like super euphoric and just all positives and good things and great. And oh my God, this is amazing. And then Peru was like a lot of darkness and
Mhm.
uncovering a lot of, you know, deep rooted trauma that we didn't even know was there, you know? So I think that's why it was such a big shock to us,
Mhm.
is because it wasn't my intention going into that of uncovering
Mhm.
this. It was just a byproduct of doing the work and the medicine, you know, that happened to unlock all this stuff. And so it was very much, it caught us off guard. It wasn't something that we were prepared for, which is
Mhm.
probably the case for a lot of people when they do this work, right? You don't really know what's going to come on the other side of it. Um, so yeah, you know, it's just like, you know, being, for me, having the support and like trusting that no matter what comes out of it. It's like I can be open and honest and tell the people around me, hey, this is what I'm going through, and kind of not worried about the repercussions of what that might be.
Right. What do you see next for yourself? Because you are this ever evolving, changing, under mile running ultra marathon bad dude. Like what do you even aspire to next at this point?
Yeah. I'm kind of in that phase right now where I'm still recovering from this run. Alex and I are going to sit down in the next couple of weeks and kind of like go over what's next for us as a couple and as a family, and putting some goals on paper for 2024 of both what we want to do individually, athletically, professionally. I don't know what's next for me exactly yet. I know that, a lot of the opportunities that I've been given over the past couple of years have come pretty spontaneously, just because I think I put myself in the right group of people and the right communities, and are having the right conversations where, when something good comes up, like I'm ready to jump on that if it does come up. Um, I'm at this phase, particularly in my professional career, where I'm really interested in kind of like doing mission driven work, right? I need to like give myself to something I truly have passion and care about, and I want to affect my community and the world, and make a positive impact. So for me, that's like really around like health and wellness space, and athletic performance is kind of like what I'm interested in kind of diving into next. Where I'm like truly interested in is, I think as we move through this next phase of where psychedelics become more accepted and popular in the healthcare realm, I think the next phase of that is, how do we use psychedelics for like human performance, athletic performance, development of that. And so I'm really interested in kind of like exploring what that looks like from an industry and a professional experience, and how can I take kind of my background and interest in psychedelics and also athletics, and kind of like blend those two things together. So that's like, I'm having a lot of conversations with people in that space and trying to figure out like where are there opportunities that I can get involved in, kind of moving that forward.
I feel like Ian McCall would be a good person for you to talk with.
I know Ian really well. So
Yeah.
he was actually in Mexico with me on my first retreat.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we were bunkmates, so he sat next to me. We had some really good ceremonies together. I love Ian. He's become a good friend of mine. I always see him when I'm out on the West Coast and stuff. But yeah, he's a good friend, and we talk quite a bit.
Yeah, that's just the first thing that came to mind, because we did our integration program together, and that's how he was on the show first, and then we did the program together, and I was like, hey, buddy. But he's like this, that human performance athletic side. It feels like a cheat code when you can get with the right people. The performance can change drastically. It makes me think about when I was an athlete. I'm starting to do some other things, and I'll talk to you about it after. But when I was an athlete before, what that could have allowed people to achieve, the mind opening possibilities with just breath alone, forget even psychedelics, the tools that you have access to, and the way that you do it. And for those of you who are just kind of finding out about Josh, but for the rest of you that are listeners through our B&U group, Josh was the one who provided us with an incredible breathwork video that so many of my people still use to this day. They use daily, and it's been a big game changer for them. And you were their first exposure to what breathwork looked like. So I appreciate you in every realm of your life, and that. But I appreciate you just showing up for others the way that you do in this community, because I know deeply you have so much to give, and you feel passionately about it. You're not just doing it for money. You care about others. And I've seen it in person. I've seen it with your work. I've seen it what you do selflessly for everyone. And just showing up for yourself, man. You're so willing to dive into places that most people would shy away from on their best days, let alone just having to do the deep, nitty gritty, hard look at life. And I wish more people could know you, because they would emulate you. They would mimic you, because if they did, they would become better versions of themselves like that. And I appreciate you for being that human that you are. And I'm so stoked to just watch you on this next part of your journey and have you back on. And I want to dive deeper into breath and deeper into what you're doing, and all of the lovely things that you are helping this world with. But more importantly, how can people find you, and how can they support what you are doing?
Yeah, I'm not, I'm not like a content creator or anything like that, but
Could be, should be.
I know everyone keeps trying to get me to do it. I just
I'm
can't.
sorry, man. If you were bad at it, no one would tell you to do it.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm on Instagram, just at Josh Duntz. And then like LinkedIn and Instagram are kind of the two platforms that I'm somewhat active on. So yeah, people can reach out to me there. I would love to connect and have conversations with other people or kind of help them out or support them in any way I can.
Well, we'll make sure to put everything in the show notes. And I know that anytime anybody asks me about the next steps of how they can progress in their life, you'll be the first person I call. So thank you so much, man, for taking time today and for sticking with us. And that's Josh Duntz, everyone else. We'll see y'all next week. You stick with me.